You know those days where your brain feels less like a finely tuned machine and maybe more like you've got, I don't know, a dozen browser tabs open at
Oh,
once?
definitely. Yeah.
You're trying to focus, maybe trying to start that one crucial thing, but you're just kind of stuck.
Yeah, or maybe the opposite. You've met someone who seems to just effortlessly juggle their schedule, stay organized, and, get things done.
Exactly. That contrast is so common, isn't it? That feeling of mental chaos versus, well, having a clear plan and the energy to actually follow through.
It really is.
Well, today we're diving deep into the brain's incredible, sometimes frustrating management system. Our sources call it executive functioning.
And we're also exploring a really fascinating field that's designed specifically to help people strengthen these vital skills, executive function coaching.
Right. And we've pulled together a really insightful collection of material for this deep dive.
Yeah, we have. We've got research articles, pieces tracing the surprising journey of coaching, like where the word even comes from, right up to today.
And detailed breakdowns of what these executive function skills actually are, right?
Exactly. Plus practical guides on the strategies used in this specialized coaching, and even some real-world examples of, how it impacts people's lives.
Okay, so our mission for you today is to unpack exactly what executive function is.
Explore that unexpected history that led to this kind of specialized support.
We'll dig into what actually happens when someone works with an executive function coach.
Look at who truly benefits, and maybe, just as importantly, who it might not be the best fit for.
And finally, see what our sources tell us about its effectiveness and, I guess, its potential.
Sounds like a plan.
Let's jump in. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. What is executive functioning? The sources describe it as the brain's management system.
That's a really good way to put it. One source calls it the CEO of the brain.
The CEO.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's primarily handled by the prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
It's not just one skill, though. It's really a whole suite of interconnected mental abilities.
The abilities that help us do what exactly?
Well, things like planning, focusing attention, remembering instructions, juggling multiple tasks successfully, sort of the background operations.
Like an operating system running everything else.
Exactly like that.
Yeah.
Think of specific skills like, say, managing your time effectively, staying organized,
Okay.
planning out the steps for a task, that really crucial ability to initiate a task, just getting started.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one for a lot of people.
It is. Then there's holding information actively in your mind. That's working memory.
Yeah.
Being mentally flexible, shifting gears.
Impulse control, too.
Definitely. Impulse control, regulating your emotions, maintaining attention over time, problem solving, setting goals, and actually working towards them.
Wow, it's a long list.
It keeps going. Decision making, monitoring your own progress as you go,
Yeah.
and even metacognition.
Metacognition.
Basically thinking about your own thinking, being aware of how you're processing things.
That list really highlights just how complex staying on track can actually be.
It absolutely does.
So what happens when these CEO skills are struggling? What some sources call EF dysfunction.
Well, that's when you might see difficulties focusing, maybe feeling forgetful, that common challenge with getting started on tasks.
Right.
Or maybe struggling to switch smoothly between different activities. It's like the CEO is feeling overwhelmed and the whole operation just feels, clunky.
And the sources talk about an EF ripple effect, which I thought was a really powerful analogy.
It is, isn't it? It captures how a seemingly small challenge in one area can kind of spread outwards, like ripples in water.
So you drop a stone in,
Hmm.
maybe struggling with a project deadline or handling an unexpected change at work. That's the stone.
Exactly. That's the initial challenge. And the immediate ripples. Those might be the missed deadlines you mentioned, maybe disappointing others, or even struggling to control frustration or anger.
Okay, makes sense.
Right. And if you don't have the strategies to manage those initial challenges, those ripples can become bigger waves over time.
How so?
Well, the sources show how these repeated struggles can build up and contribute to pretty significant issues. Problems with academic or work performance, feeling perpetually stuck, developing poor habits, and potentially even leading to or worsening feelings of anxiety or depression.
Wow.
Yeah, and sometimes even social isolation if people feel misunderstood or just constantly overwhelmed in their relationships. It's a stark reminder these aren't just minor personality quirks for many people.
That really puts it into perspective. But, okay, there's a really critical, hopeful takeaway here too, isn't there? These sources make it abundantly clear. Executive function skills are not fixed at birth.
Yes, This is maybe the most important point. Contrary to that old idea that you either have these skills or you don't, or maybe that they only develop when you're a kid,
Right.
the research is really clear. EF skills can absolutely be learned, they can be strengthened and improved at any age.
Any age, that's huge.
It is, with the right support and the right strategies.
Yeah.
And that's really where this idea of coaching comes into its own.
Which brings us neatly to the history. And this is where the word coach itself has a surprisingly literal and old origin.
It really does. It has nothing initially to do with sports or even personal development and the way we think about it now.
Okay.
The word coach actually traces back to a specific town in 15th century Hungary, a place called Kuk.
Kuk. K-O-C.
Yep, Kuk.
Yeah.
They were famous for building carriages. So the original meaning of coach was literally a vehicle.
A vehicle.
Yeah, designed to take someone from point A to point B, physically transport them.
Okay, so the core idea is transportation, moving someone. How did that metaphor jump from carriages to, well, guiding people?
It seems the metaphor first popped up in an academic setting at Oxford University back in the 1830s.
Oxford, what were they using it for?
Students started using the term coach for a tutor.
A tutor. Like getting them from point A where their knowledge is now?
Exactly. To point B, where they needed to be academically.
Hmm.
Helping them get from their current level of understanding to the required standard. That idea of guiding someone on a journey towards a goal just stuck.
Interesting. And then it started showing up in the professional world.
Gradually, yeah. I mean, informal guidance from managers has always existed, right?
Yeah.
One source mentions a paper by someone named Gorby back in 1937 discussing supervisory coaching for productivity, like in manufacturing.
So early hints of workplace coaching.
Right, but the formal concept of professional coaching as a distinct practice, that really began to take shape much later, around the mid-1980s.
Okay, mid-'80s.
Yeah, early companies like New Ventures West or Hudson Institute, I think they were both founded around 1986. They were pioneers in developing structured coaching methods.
So they were formalizing that point A to point B idea, but for careers and maybe personal growth?
Precisely. And this momentum led to the formalization of the field itself, mainly through professional associations that started forming in the 1990s.
Like the ICF.
Yes, exactly. Organizations like NAPC, IAPPC, which later became PPCA, and most notably, the International Coach Federation, the ICF, formed in 1995. They were key in establishing ethical guidelines, standards, credentialing,
Made it more legitimate.
hugely important. And other groups like EMCC and WABC also emerged around the world. That standardization was crucial for credibility.
And as all this was happening, academic research started catching up.
It did, applying these coaching principles to organizational settings, and that's where the term executive coaching really got coined,
Yeah.
often focused on leaders and managers.
Right, helping executives get from A to B in their roles.
You're pretty much. Kilberg's 2007 definition, which one source cites, describes it as this structured relationship using behavioral techniques to improve performance and satisfaction, usually within a formal agreement in a company context.
Okay, so we've gone from a physical carriage to academic tutoring, then professional development, executive coaching. That whole evolution laid the groundwork for even more specialization.
Absolutely. That broad base in guiding people from point A to point B, combined with the growing understanding that specific skills can be learned and improved, well, that directly led to the development of specialized areas.
Like executive function coaching.
Exactly. Focusing specifically on strengthening those core CEO skills we talked about earlier for anyone who needs that support, no matter their age or where they are in life.
Okay, so zooming in on that specialization then, what actually happens in executive function coaching? What does that support look like in practice?
Well, think of an EF coach as a kind of skilled guide and an accountability partner, someone who helps you build the muscles for managing your brain's systems.
One source called them a personal trainer for the brain, which I liked.
That's a great analogy, and it's really important to stress, as you mentioned, they are not therapists or medical professionals.
Right, that's a key distinction.
Very important. EF coaches operate in a non-clinical space. They don't diagnose or treat mental health conditions, but they often do work alongside therapists or doctors.
Providing a complementary layer of support, focused on skills.
Exactly. Skill-building support.
Okay, so it's collaborative, non-clinical, focused on teaching skills. What's the typical journey like for someone working with an EF coach?
It's definitely highly personalized, but there tends to be a clear process. It usually kicks off with an initial assessment.
You figure out what's going on.
Yeah, to really understand your specific strengths and, importantly, your challenges with those executive functions. Coaches might use different tools, maybe questionnaires or interviews, but the goal is just to get a clear picture of how your unique CEO operates.
Makes sense. Then it's about setting goals.
Yes, absolutely. Working together to define what success actually looks like for you. So goal setting and planning.
And these goals need to be concrete.
Ideally, yes. Setting realistic, achievable goals that you can actually track. Coaches often use frameworks like SMART goals.
SMART, meaning?
Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Just makes them less vague. So you know exactly what you're aiming for.
Got it. So you have the assessment, you have the goals. Then what?
Then comes the real core of it, implementing strategies. This is where you start applying tailored techniques and tools that fit your specific needs.
And the coach helps you practice these.
Exactly. Practice them in real-life situations. And it's not a one-and-done thing. There's continuous monitoring progress, seeing what's working, what maybe isn't, and adjusting the plan as you go.
Okay, so it's iterative.
Very much so. And the ultimate aim, the end goal, is for you, the client, to eventually manage these skills independently.
Transition to independence.
That's the core goal, yeah. The coach equips you with the tools and the confidence to become your own brain CEO, so to speak.
Okay, let's talk specifics then. What kind of strategies does a coach actually use? The sources detail quite a few techniques. It sounds less like just giving advice and more like building new habits and systems.
That's exactly right. It's much more about creating external structures and internal routines to support the brain's natural, sometimes struggling processes.
Okay, give me an example, like for time management.
Sure. Instead of just saying be on time, a coach helps you break down why you might be late. Is it underestimating how long things take? Difficulty prioritizing? Trouble transitioning?
Right.
Then they might help you build systems, maybe using visual calendars, breaking tasks down with estimated times written next to them, using timers to work in focus blocks like the Pomodoro technique. It's about making time feel more visible and manageable.
So externalizing that internal sense of time that might be weak?
Precisely. Or take organization. It's about creating predictable systems, whether that's for your physical space or your digital files.
Like a place for everything and everything in its place.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Setting up designated spots for items, routines for processing emails or mail. The key principle is reducing the mental load. You don't have to constantly figure out where things are or what to do next.
Takes the decision-making burden off.
Exactly. One source even mentions scheduling dedicated time for periodic cleanup or organization rather than aiming for constant, perfect order, which can be overwhelming.
Okay, realistic. What about task initiation, that hurdle of just getting started?
Oh, that's a huge one for so many people.
Yeah.
And it's crucial to understand it's usually not laziness. It's often a break in the connection between knowing you should do something and actually starting it.
Right. So how does a coach help there?
They help lower the activation energy. Maybe by breaking large tasks down into the absolute smallest possible first step, like just open the document or put your shoes on.
Makes it less daunting.
Totally. Or creating routines around starting certain tasks, like every morning, first thing, I check my calendar. Using visual prompts, setting timers for just 5 minutes to start, or even just having a brief check-in with the coach can act as that external trigger to initiate.
Making the start so small it feels non-threatening.
Exactly right. Then there's planning. This is about making the future feel less abstract and overwhelming.
How so?
Coaches might help you use calendars not just for appointments, but for plotting out the steps of a project over time, creating timelines. And a key strategy mentioned in the sources is encouraging reflection after a task or project. Asking things like, okay, how did that plan actually work out? Did it go as expected? What could we do differently next time?
Ah, so building the planning muscle itself.
Yes, you're learning from experience to improve future planning. It's like creating a reusable recipe book for tackling common types of tasks or challenges.
I like that. Recipe book. What about working memory, holding things in mind?
Yes, support here is often about reducing the reliance on having to hold everything in your head at once.
Externalizing again.
Pretty much. Prompting you to write things down immediately, breaking down complex instructions into smaller chunks, asking you to repeat instructions back to ensure understanding, using checklists for multi-step processes like the sources mention examples like long division or lab procedures, pre-teaching outlines before a lecture. The goal is to offload information from that limited working memory space so the CEO isn't overloaded and can actually focus on processing the information or doing the task itself. Think of it like using scratch paper for a complex math problem instead of trying to do it all mentally.
Externalizing information storage. Makes sense. What about emotional regulation? That feels a bit like therapy territory.
It can overlap, but the focus in EF coaching is different. It's relevant because EF challenges themselves can lead to frustration, overwhelm, or anxiety.
Ah, okay.
So a coach might help you anticipate situations that typically trigger strong emotions and then collaboratively plan coping strategies beforehand.
Proactive.
Right. They might provide objective feedback on how your emotional responses are impacting your progress toward your goals, or help you identify the early warning signs of distress so you can use a learned calming technique, like walking away, deep breathing, or cognitive reframing.
So applying planning and self-awareness skills to your emotional responses.
You could say that, yeah. It's about recognizing the emotion and helping you choose a more productive response rather than just being swept away by it.
Okay. And the last big one you mentioned earlier was self-monitoring.
Right. This is about building awareness of how you're doing while you're doing something.
Hmm.
Are you on track? Is this working?
How do you coach that?
It could involve building in specific review or editing steps for tasks, setting goals for accuracy over just speed, using timers or clocks, not just for deadlines, but to check in on your progress. Okay, I predicted this would take 30 minutes. How am I actually doing?
Interesting.
Or using external cues, like noticing when peers are finishing up. For social self-monitoring, a coach might help you identify specific social cues to observe in others, providing feedback on social impact, maybe even structured social skills work.
So the coach acts as a sort of temporary external guide while you build those internal monitoring systems.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
And it really underscores that this whole process is a collaborative partnership.
Yeah, that seems crucial.
Absolutely. Trust, support, and consistent accountability are foundational. The coach provides the structure, the tools, the guidance, but it's your active engagement, putting those strategies into practice between sessions, that's where the real change happens.
Okay, so given all these strategies and that collaborative approach, who really benefits from executive function coaching? Is it, just for kids with ADHD or something specific like that?
Well, the sources are pretty clear that it's potentially beneficial for a really wide range of people, actually. Anyone across the lifespan who finds themselves struggling with these specific kinds of skills.
So children, teens, adults.
Yep. Even parents trying to manage their own executive functions while also supporting their kids. Professionals juggling complex workloads, students trying to manage academics, leaders needing to improve planning and delegation.
Basically, if you feel consistently overwhelmed by daily demands, time management, organization, getting things started, EFC could be relevant.
That seems to be the message, yes. If those core management system struggles are getting in the way of you reaching your goals or just feeling capable day to day.
And while it helps broadly, are there specific populations who tend to seek it out more often?
Yes, definitely. It's very common for individuals who have conditions where executive function challenges are often a core feature like ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, or certain learning disabilities.
Okay.
It's also highlighted as being incredibly helpful during significant life transitions,
Like what?
like starting university, maybe beginning a challenging new job, navigating divorce, or any major life change that really require you to adapt or step up your personal management systems.
Right, when your old ways aren't cutting it anymore. Okay, but it's clearly not a universal fit. Who might it not be suitable for? When would EFC maybe not be the right approach?
That's a really important question, and the sources do address this. EFC isn't appropriate for everyone or every situation. For instance, it's generally not for someone who is in an acute crisis or needs significant mental health treatment unless they are already receiving that professional help concurrently.
So it's not a replacement for therapy if therapy is needed.
Absolutely not. It complements, it doesn't replace. Also, because it requires active participation and effort, it likely won't work well for someone who's really just looking for a quick fix, or someone who's unwilling to challenge their own assumptions or try new ways of doing things.
You have to be ready to engage.
You really do. One source was actually a Reddit thread discussing coaching really hammered home that the success relies almost entirely on the client being ready and willing to do the hard work between the sessions. The coach can't do it for you.
That makes sense. Any other groups?
Active substance users who aren't currently in treatment are also generally not considered good candidates. And practically speaking, you need to be able to commit to attending the sessions consistently.
Okay, so readiness, willingness to work, and stability are key. What about effectiveness then? Do the sources indicate that this actually works, Or is it more based on anecdotes?
The sources generally paint a pretty positive picture. They suggest it can be quite impactful, really helping people translate their underlying potential into better actual performance.
Got an example?
Yeah, one source used the example of someone they called Pearl. She apparently came into coaching feeling completely swamped by work and life demands.
Okay.
And through coaching, she was able to implement strategies that made her significantly more productive, more organized, and ultimately achieved a much better work-life balance.
That sounds genuinely transformative.
It does, right. But it's important to note, it's definitely not presented as some kind of magic bullet or guaranteed solution.
Okay, so what are the limitations?
Well, the sources are realistic. It won't work for everyone. Its success depends heavily on factors beyond just the coach's skill, things like the client's own motivation, their external circumstances, and critically, their consistent effort between those sessions.
Like we just discussed.
Exactly. And it can fail if the coach lacks the right expertise or maybe doesn't dedicate enough time and attention. Poorly delivered coaching could even come across as kind of micromanaging, which wouldn't be helpful at all.
Right. So how do you even measure success in something so personal? How do you know if it's working?
That's a fair question. Good coaches, according to the sources,
Mm.
don't just rely on feelings. They use concrete measures. Remember that initial assessment?
Yeah.
They often revisit that to track progress.
Hmm.
And they work with clients to set those quantifiable, trackable goals we talked about earlier, the SMART goals.
Ah, okay.
So effectiveness is often measured by seeing if you're actually achieving those specific goals you set out to achieve. Whether that's submitting assignments on time more consistently, keeping your workspace organized for a certain period, or successfully following through on planned steps for a project, it's tied to real-world outcomes.
Got it. Measurable progress towards defined goals. Now, the practical side, cost and accessibility. This sounds potentially expensive.
That is a significant factor, and the sources address it. EF coaching is typically a self-pay service.
Meaning not usually covered by standard health insurance?
Generally, no. Hourly rates can vary quite widely, usually somewhere in the range of, say, $75 up to $250 per hour, sometimes more, depending on the coach's credentials, experience, and location.
Oof. Yeah, that can definitely be a barrier for a lot of people.
It absolutely can be. However, some sources do mention a couple of possibilities. Sometimes employee assistance programs, EAPs, or corporate wellness benefits might offer some coverage or sessions.
Okay.
And depending on your specific health plan, it might be reimbursable through a flexible spending account, FSA, or health savings account, HSA, especially if it's recommended by a doctor for managing symptoms related to a diagnosed condition like ADHD. But that varies a lot.
So, worth looking into, but likely out of pocket for many? How do people find a coach?
Often through referrals maybe from therapists, doctors, schools. Online directories specializing in coaching are another route. But the key is really doing your homework, checking credentials, understanding their approach, and maybe doing an initial consultation call to see if it feels like a good fit personality-wise. That relationship is important.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. We've journeyed from 15th century Hungarian carriages
Right.
all the way to the structured support of modern executive function coaching. We've unpacked the complex CEO skills that make up our brain's management system.
And explored how this specialized coaching provides really concrete strategies and that personalized guidance to help people strengthen those skills across all areas, school, work, just daily life.
It seems it's really about equipping individuals to better navigate the just constant information overload and competing demands of modern life.
Yeah, helping them move from feeling overwhelmed or stuck towards feeling more capable, more in control, and better able to actually pursue the goals that matter to them.
It really highlights the power of understanding how our brains manage tasks, doesn't it? And the potential for real growth when people get the right kind of tools and support.
Absolutely. And thinking about this incredible management system that we all have operating in our heads, and that truly empowering idea from the sources that these skills are not fixed.
Yeah, that they can be learned and improved at any age, no matter your starting point.
It really leaves you with a compelling question, doesn't it? Considering your own life, or maybe thinking about someone you know, where might focusing on strengthening these core executive functions make the biggest difference?
That's a great question. Consider how becoming a more skilled CEO of your own brain, learning to manage that internal management system more effectively, might just be the key to unlocking potential you didn't even realize was waiting.
Well said.
Thank you so much for sharing these sources with us and enabling this really fascinating deep dive today.